Evening, everyone, and thanks for joining me tonight for tonight's Facebook live training from Drayton, where we're going to be looking at some energy savings. So this has all come about because we commissioned a survey of 2,000 people, and the results are in. And the good thing about this is we can use this to drive business essentially. So customers need to start thinking about if they've got traditional controls like an 𝗵𝗲𝘁𝗶𝗴 and a traditional dial thermostat. We've got products like the RF902 now, the 2-channel digistat, where we can control both heating and hot water using the one control. And by doing that, we're giving the customer some load compensation. So we're giving them a control that is able to do some thermal profiling, so it learns how quickly the rooms gain and lose heat. And it's also a good conversation starter for upgrading to 𝗲𝗁 and things like that, and moving away from 𝗲𝗁, not just on the smart aspect, but things like using the new auto balancing valves. So, if we want to drive efficiency into people's heating systems, a good way of doing that is making sure that the system is set up properly and balanced. And probably the best way of doing that currently is with the Drayton auto balancing valves. So there's going to be a few things that we cover off really, but it's all really to answer the question that we've been getting a lot here, which is, we get customers phoning up saying, what can I do to make sure I'm not spending too much money on fuel? And it's just getting that balance between, if they turn their boiler off, they're not going to be burning any fuel, but then they're going to be cold. And it's just getting that balance between how we can make sure that they've got a decent level of comfort, but also that they are that they're not spending an absolute fortune on fuel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just share my screen here, and I want to start off by just looking at these statistics which have come in. So this was the survey that we conducted, just really trying to get a grasp of what people feel about their heating system, and how confident they are knowing what their heating system is all about, and where they are in terms of being able to control it. So 41% admitted they didn't confidently understand how their heating system worked, and worse than that, 62% have had a go and feel that they've not been able to personalize it. Now, this is not just for smart controls, this is across the board, but what it does indicate is there is a lack of understanding amongst your customers on how their heating systems should actually be set up and how to run. And consequently, you're getting a lot of people that are just turning the thermostats up when they want heat to any arbitrary figure. They're sticking it up to maybe 30. And again, you've got this perceived idea that the higher they set their room stat, the quicker it will achieve temperature, which obviously we know in reality is not the case. The system will heat up at the rate it will heat up at, regardless of what the room stat is set at. But ultimately, this plays into this figure of 3/4 of those people openly think that they are wasting money and wasting energy because they don't understand their heating systems and they're unable to set them in a way that they want. Now, given that, the prediction is now that the average householder is going to be paying £2,500 for their heating or for their energy bill. If 3/4 of people think that they're wasting energy, there's a lot of people there that we can sort of target and say, that we've got controls and we've got systems in place that we could fit for you and to save you some energy. And when you're talking about a heating bill or an energy bill of £2,500, any sort of percentage saving that you can make on that actually will translate into quite significant saving for the customer. Now, as well as this, well, as a part, what's come out of this survey is that we've put together a heating guide, a home heating guide aimed at customers. I'll show you how to get it. So if you get your customers to head over to the 𝗲𝗁 website, the consumer website for 𝗲𝗁, under resources there is the energy saving page. And this is a good thing to have on the van anyway, because what I've found is, and we've given this to all of our customer service guys, because the thing with this is it gives you something to go back on. If the customer says, you know, if you're fitting Wiser, how much money is it saving me? Or if I need to balance my system, how much money does it save me? You've got some figures to hand. So pop your email address in, and then it gives you the link to download the home heating guide. So just work your way through that, and then there it is. So download that, and I'll just take you through what it's showing. So again, this is, like I said, this is all driven by the survey that we did, but there's lots of good content in there. So this is not a sales pitch. This is really a document that homeowners can use to understand that if they do make changes and they do make upgrades to their system, they've got capability to save money. But there's also tips in there on things that don't cost any money. And there's a few things that I really want to sort of flag up here. Particularly things talking about reducing your boiler thermostat temperature, because you know there is the potential that we could run into some trouble, particularly with those that are storing their hot water. So this idea of turning your boiler temperature down is good. It's great if you've got a combi boiler where your hot water is on demand and it's driven by the flow switch, and it will ramp to whatever temperature that's set to. But if we've just got the one boiler thermostat giving an output, and that's then going through an S plan or a Y plan, and we're trying to service a hot water cylinder, then dropping your boiler temperature is not going to be great, because you run into issues with Legionella. So I think that there's, just from talking to customers on the phone over the last week, that's certainly something that they're talking about is, you know, how do I turn my boiler temperature down? But and again, they're not taking into consideration the types of systems that they've got. So fine with a combi, but if you're storing hot water, not so good. So here we've got some figures on energy use, and a lot of this is coming directly from Ofgem. We've also had studies done in-house and also by BEMA. So the figures that we are pushing out here do have some accreditation, particularly when we start talking about the sort of savings that you can make with Wiser. But as you can see, it's quite an extensive document. There's energy saving tips here by turning your room stat down by 1 degree. Now, typically, on an average property, that's going to save you in excess of £80 a year. But which is fine. But it's getting that balance right between comfort and being able to save energy. And for me, rather than setting the whole of the house down by 1 degree, whilst it doesn't cost anything to do that, what we really should be looking at is giving the customers room by room control. So this idea that we've got one centralized thermostat that turns on the whole of your heating, you don't do that. You don't run your lights in that way. You don't come in through the front door and turn one light switch on and it turns every light on in the house. And if a light gets left on, we sort of get a little bit upset by that. But in reality, that's what we're doing with our heating, and it's a much more costly commodity. So multi-zoning with Wiser using the smart radiator thermostats, this is really where you can start to drive some efficiency into your house, and it's really the way we should be doing it. We should only be heating rooms when we need to heat them. There's other tips in there about things like closing your curtains at night, also like closing doors as well. That's another one that comes up. If you're going to go to the effort of multi-zoning with Wiser, there's not a lot of point if you don't close the doors and actually isolate the rooms. So again, but customers and end users aren't thinking about this. They're not seeing the full picture. But just something like closing your curtains at night just improves the thermal efficiency of the room, and by doing that, it's not going to require so much heat to warm up the room, and you're not going to lose it as quick as you would if you've just got you've just got the window there. So upgrading to smart can save up to 18%. So this is going from a control where you've just got time and temperature control, which is what most properties have got now, or certainly would have had as dictated by Part L of the building regs. We've got to have that time and temperature control, but we really need to start getting some intelligence into it. So we need to be ensuring that whatever control we fit has got some capability to learn the thermal characteristics of the property and respond accordingly. And that's why I say if you've got a 2-channel programmer like an 𝗵𝗲𝘁𝗶𝗴𝗃 with a dial thermostat like an RTS1, real easy way of giving your customer some load compensation and some smart, intelligent control is to use the new Digistat, the RF902, the 2-channel. That would take the place of the the LP. You would link out your room stat as you would if you were fitting Wiser, and then the customer has immediately got some, even if they're not using the Bluetooth side and they're not using the app to run the control, they've immediately got some thermal profiling and a control that is able to know when it needs to come on in order to fulfill set point. So we cover off also on this. You get a lot of customers that don't understand what sort of heating system they've got. They don't understand the difference between conventional, system boiler and combi. Most people, I would say, know if they've got a combi, and the quick check is easy. We can just say, do you have a hot water cylinder? And they pretty much know about having a big cylinder in the house somewhere. But this really just goes through and gives them a bit of a briefing on the different types of boilers, and again, what to look out for, keeping your cylinder stats at a level where we can combat Legionella, but not to have it so hot that it never actually achieves set point. So your timer is on, the boiler's running for the full timed period if that's how you're running it. So we also talk a little bit about things to look out for, like undersized radiators, because if you've got an undersized radiator, your room is always going to be cold. But we also want to try and get the customers thinking about the general condition of their heating system. So making sure that radiators are bled, and also having a look at balancing as well, making sure that the system is balanced, which from a homeowner's point of view is a difficult thing to do. But what we are finding now is we're getting a lot of guys that they're going around to customers' houses to do a boiler service, and that's when the customers are saying to them, I know you're looking at the boiler, but what have you got any tips that you can give me for my system? And that's when we can start talking about flushing. So for me, flushing is quite a big deal. We need to make sure it doesn't have to necessarily be a power flush, because that can sometimes cause more issues than it resolves. But certainly we want to be on some sort of periodic renewal of the system water and inhibitor. So something like maybe every 5 years, if you every 5th service, maybe have the system drained down and just flush it, top it back up with new inhibitor. But when you're doing that, it's a really good time to be able to get auto balancing valves in. So flush with the old bodies in, go around, take all the TRV heads off, flush with the old bodies in, and then swap the bodies out before you refill for the auto balancing. And I talked a little bit about that on the last session, about how we calculate that, and I will cover that in a minute, just to show you what you need to do if you don't know the radiator output. But it's a really nice way. In terms of what the customer's paying, they're going to be paying for your time to fit new bodies, and they're going to be paying for the new auto balancing bodies. But they are available as body only. So if you were upgrading somebody from TRV4s or RT414s, or even for that matter RT212s, you're going to still have all the heads. So you would just be buying the body only. But then you know that you can leave that property and the system is balanced, and it's dynamically balanced all the way through the range, even from when the system's cold right through to when the TRVs start to throttle down and the pressure in the system starts to rise, boiler starts to modulate down. But we can say that we are getting consistent flow into each radiator based on the radiator's requirements from either its size in terms of kilowatt or BTU output, or how much what the size of the radiator is in terms of its dimensions. So we cover that off. We also talk about common inefficiencies, like I said there, having the system balanced. Now, most of your customers will know how to bleed a radiator, and that will be their go-to thing if they find they've got code spots. But then if bleeding doesn't get rid of it, it's highly likely that the system is going to be out of balance, and that's where you can come in and talk about the auto balancing valve. We've also got the idea of a system that's not zoned. So and easily for me, the best way of getting some efficiency into a customer's house is by being able to subdivide. Now, 𝗿𝗏𝘁𝗲 being a modular system, they don't have to commit to a full estate of heads. If they've got 10 radiators on their system, they don't have to do them all at once. But if you're fitting a partial system, you do something typically where you've got the room thermostat covering the majority of the house, and if you've just bought a multi-zone system, then the 2 TRV heads would be fitted in the bedroom, so that you could have the bedroom scheduled to be off during the day, rest of the room thermostat doing the majority of the house, and then for when you come to go to bed, you would have had a schedule set so that the bedrooms come into an on period, maybe 20 minutes before you want to go to bed. And then as far as the customer is concerned, they go into a nice warm bedroom. The difference is that bedroom hasn't been heating to whatever the previous setting was on the mechanical TRV as a function of the rest of the house being on because of the room thermostat. So the true essence of 𝗿𝗏𝘁𝗶𝗴 is this ability to be able to subdivide and zone off areas of the house, different rooms, without having to cut any pipes or do any invasive installation work. So we've got a little checklist there of top things to ask the installer. So these are the sort of things that if you direct the customer to this guide, what you could end up being asked. But again, this and hopefully this session will give you the sort of answers that you require and the sort of things that you can suggest to improve the efficiency of your customers' heating system, improve the efficiency of their heating system. Now, here we come on to the idea of lower flow temperatures. So this is something that's really starting to get a bit of momentum, and I think it's important to point it out because it can be a bit of a problem when we're talking in terms of systems where we don't have like a Legionella cycle, so we don't have a cylinder stat that can call for heat periodically to do a Legionella cycle. So we've got to be a bit careful what we tell customers about dropping flow temperature. Like I say, for a combi boiler, it's absolutely fine because you've normally got the 2 boiler stats on the boiler, one for central heating, one for hot water, so you can have them set at different temperatures, so you can lower your flow temperature for your radiators to make sure that your return stays below 54 degrees, so that you are that we don't tell people to turn their boiler temperatures down to say 55 degrees, because if they do, by the time the hot water gets to the cylinder and the losses that it will have by the time it gets there, we potentially could create a breeding ground for Legionella, which obviously is not something we want to do. So just be mindful if they do mention turning the boiler thermostat down, or if they say to you that's something that they've done, the next question we've really got to be asking is, okay, so what sort of system have you got? Because if it's stored hot water, we could be asking for trouble there. We've also included a little video which talks about the various benefits of eco mode. So typically eco mode on a boiler, particularly with the 𝗿𝗏𝘁𝗶𝗴s, you've got this little cylinder that holds hot water inside it, which it keeps warm. And depending on what controls you've got, you might have some time control over that. So it may be that you can set it so that it doesn't do it overnight, but during the day it does. And the idea is that you don't have to run off so much hot water or it would be cold water, but you don't have to run so much water through the hot tap before the water starts to come hot. So you're not having to wait for the boiler to kick in and spool up and be delivering that hot water. It will take from the little internal cylinder within the combi boiler. And eco mode really just controls that. And like I say, if you've got something like the clip-in that's shown on screen there, if it's an 𝗵𝗲20 or an 𝗵𝗲20 RF, that gives you capability of timing and having some time control over that small cylinder, so that you're not keeping that up to temperature at night. And which actually declare that 50% of the fuel bill is for heating and hot water. So anything that we can do to try and mitigate and reduce energy consumption is going to be, the customers are going to realize quite good saving. But again, we don't want to just say to them, turn your boiler off and sit in the cold, because our job here is to make sure that we're giving them a good level of comfort, but also we are not heating when we don't need to be, and we're only heating the rooms that they need. So we've got some top 5 smart heating benefits here of 𝗿𝗿𝗁. So that's something that's always good. The voice control capability, I would typically use that in conjunction with schedules. So I wouldn't be talking to Alexa and Google all the time to get my heating on. You'd have a baseline schedule that more or less suits your lifestyle, and then if you want heat outside of that, you're home early one day or something, that's when you would use voice control and the boost facility, either on the app or on the in-home device. So you can, those are there if you need them, but really we want to be trying to automate the process. So take the time initially to go through, set your schedules up for each zone, and then go through and set them, aligning them to your lifestyle. Once you're there, leave it in auto mode. And like I say, if you want heating outside of that time, then you can use the boost, so you don't need to go in and set the schedule. We've also got some testimonials from 𝗿𝗿𝗁 customers, giving their thoughts on what they think of the system, and a little bit of forward thinking here about what the net zero targets are for the UK and how that's likely to impact what's going to happen in the industry. A little bit on heat pumps there, and again, this idea of if you can drop your boiler flow temperature to say 55 degrees, if you are running a combi, it's a good thing to do, because it's sort of getting the customer in the swing of what to expect when they get heat pumps, because obviously your heat pump is going to have a much lower flow temperature for the wet radiator system. Now, heat pumps do have Legionella cycling on them, because you'll always end up with a big cylinder that it uses to store its hot water. We need to move away from that, because it's certainly countering what we're trying to do when we're trying to drive our efficiency. Some domestic heating targets, again, just a little bit of looking towards the future to see what's coming. There's the target of 600,000 heat pumps to be installed by 2028.